Have you ever stopped to ask yourself whether the life you are living right now is the result of fate, circumstance, and luck, or whether it is the exact reflection of the thoughts you have allowed to dominate your mind for years without question, without discipline, without resistance? There comes a moment in every life when excuses collapse under the weight of truth, when the mind can no longer hide behind blame, and when a single realization pierces through years of confusion that success and failure are not events that happen to a person, but conditions a person manufactures from within. If you are listening to these words, it is not by accident. You are here because some quiet, persistent force inside you knows that your story is unfinished, that what appears to be an ending is nothing more than a pause before a far greater return. What you are about to experience is not motivation, it is confrontation. It is the unveiling of the invisible mental laws that have governed your outcomes, whether you believed in them or not. Napoleon Hill taught that every comeback begins long before the world sees evidence of it. It begins in the private territory of thought, where desire is either allowed to burn with intensity or slowly suffocated by doubt. Most people never fail publicly first. They fail silently, internally, by allowing their purpose to blur, their faith to weaken, and their discipline to decay. They drift, and drifting is the most dangerous state a human mind can occupy because it feels harmless while it erodes destiny. If your life has collapsed, if momentum has been lost, if confidence feels distant, understand this clearly. The collapse did not begin with circumstances. It began with a gradual surrender of mental control. You did not lose your way all at once. You surrendered it inch by inch, thought by thought, decision by decision. Hill warned that the mind, left undirected, becomes a breeding ground for fear, indecision, and self-sabotage. A comeback does not start by changing the world around you. It starts by reclaiming authority over the world within you. The greatest deception society ever sold was the idea that success is external, that it is granted by opportunity, luck, timing, or permission. Hill dismantled this illusion mercilessly. He showed that success is an inner alignment of definiteness of purpose, emotionalized desire, unwavering faith, and relentless persistence. When these forces are unified, circumstances are forced to reorganize. When they are absent, no opportunity is ever enough. Right now, you may feel behind. You may feel as though time has moved faster than you, as though others have surpassed you, as though mistakes have permanently defined you. This perception is not reality. It is a mental condition. Hill emphasized that the mind does not measure truth, it magnifies belief. Whatever you consistently believe about yourself, your capacity, and your future becomes the blueprint your subconscious mind works tirelessly to make real. Your comeback begins the moment you accept full responsibility for the thoughts you have entertained. Responsibility is not guilt. Responsibility is power reclaimed. The instant you stop blaming circumstances, people, luck, or the past, you regain control over the present. Hill made it clear that every human being possesses the ability to shape their destiny, but only those willing to discipline their thinking ever do. Understand this deeply. Desire alone is not enough. Millions desire success and remain exactly where they are. Hill distinguished between weak wishing and burning desire. A burning desire is obsessive, persistent, emotionally charged. It becomes the central organizing force of the mind. It crowds out fear. It overrides fatigue. It refuses compromise. If your desire does not keep you awake at night, it is not strong enough to carry you through resistance. This comeback will demand that you redefine your relationship with pain. Most people run from discomfort. Hill taught that pain is not an enemy, but a signal, a refining force. Temporary defeat is not permanent failure unless you allow it to become so by surrendering belief. Every setback carries within it the seed of an equal or greater benefit, but only to the mind trained to search for it. The untrained mind sees only loss. The disciplined mind extracts wisdom and converts it into momentum. Faith, as Hill described it, is not religious abstraction. It is the ability to hold a mental image of success with such clarity and emotional conviction that the subconscious accepts it as reality. Faith is developed through repetition, through autosuggestion, through the deliberate feeding of empowering ideas to the mind until they override fear-based patterns. Your mind has been conditioned whether you intended it or not. This comeback requires reconditioning. Autosuggestion is the bridge between conscious desire and subconscious action. Every thought you repeatedly impress upon your mind becomes instruction. The tragedy is that most people unknowingly program themselves for mediocrity by rehearsing doubt, fear, and limitation daily. Hill taught that the subconscious does not argue. It accepts what it is repeatedly told, especially when emotion is involved. If your internal dialogue has been hostile, this is where your comeback begins, by changing what you tell yourself when no one else is listening. Fear is the greatest enemy of human potential. Hill identified fear not as a protective instinct, but as a mental virus that paralyzes decision and suffocates initiative. The fears of poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love, old age, and death silently dictate behavior. They keep people small, cautious, and obedient to circumstances. A comeback demands fear mastery, not fear elimination. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. Decision is power crystallized. Hill observed that successful people make decisions quickly and change them slowly, while unsuccessful people do the opposite. Indecision drains energy. It scatters focus. It keeps the mind in a perpetual state of hesitation. If your life feels stagnant, examine how long you linger in uncertainty. A comeback begins the moment you decide with finality who you are becoming and refuse to negotiate with doubt. Persistence is the sustained application of effort backed by belief. It is what separates momentary enthusiasm from lasting transformation. Hill made it clear that persistence is not a personality trait, but a habit that can be cultivated. Every time you continue despite resistance, you strengthen your identity as someone who does not quit. Every time you retreat, you reinforce the opposite. Your comeback will test this relentlessly. Self-discipline is the ability to control impulses, emotions, and reactions. Without it, desire dissipates. Hill emphasized that the mind must be governed, or it will be governed by external forces. Discipline is not punishment. It is structure. It is the framework that allows creative power to operate effectively. Your comeback requires you to become ruthless with distractions, excuses, and emotional indulgence. Imagination is the workshop of the mind, ever. Anything ever created existed there first. Hill distinguished between synthetic imagination, which rearranges existing ideas, and creative imagination, which taps into deeper, unseen intelligence. Your comeback requires imagination not as fantasy, but as visualization with intent. You must see yourself as the person who has already overcome, already achieved, already returned stronger. The mind moves toward images it repeatedly contemplates. There are invisible forces at work shaping your life right now. Thoughts are not harmless, they are causes. Circumstances are effects. Hill insisted that the mind operates under laws as real as gravity. Ignore them and they still apply. Align with them and life begins to respond in ways that seem almost supernatural to the uninitiated. You may believe you have lost time. Hill would tell you that time lost in confusion can be reclaimed in clarity. A focused mind moves faster than years of unfocused effort. Your comeback is not delayed. It is preparing. But preparation demands commitment. Half-hearted belief produces half-lived lives. This moment is not about hope. It is about decision. It is about choosing to stop negotiating with weakness. It is about reclaiming your mental territory inch by inch. You are not broken. You are undisciplined. You are not unlucky. You are unfocused. You are not incapable. You are uncommitted. These conditions can be changed, but only by you. As you continue listening, understand that this is not entertainment. This is instruction. This is the unveiling of principles that will either be applied or ignored. Hill warned that knowledge unused is more dangerous than ignorance because it deepens regret. Your comeback does not require permission. It requires obedience to mental law. The world will not announce your return. There will be no signal, no applause, no validation. Your comeback begins silent. Lie in thought, in resolve, in the disciplined refusal to accept your current state as final. The mind that once drifted must now be commanded. The desire that once flickered must now burn. The faith that once wavered must now harden into certainty. This is where it begins. The moment you decide to rise again, the mind does something dangerous and powerful at the same time. It begins to resist you. Not because it hates success, but because it is addicted to familiarity. Napoleon Hill understood this deeply. He knew that the greatest enemy of a comeback is not failure, not poverty, not circumstances, but the subconscious attachment to the old identity. The version of you that learned how to survive without demanding more, the version that adapted to disappointment and quietly accepted limitation as realism. When you attempt to outgrow that version, your mind will fight back with memories, emotions, and doubts disguised as logic. This is where most comebacks die, not in the world, but in the private theater of thought. A person feels inspired, sees possibility, even tastes the future for a moment, and then the mind whispers, "Be careful. You've tried before. Remember how that ended." Hill called this the voice of fear, and he warned that it is always reasonable, always convincing, always rooted in the past. Fear never speaks about the future honestly. It speaks only about history, selectively edited to keep you small. Your task now is not to silence fear, but to overpower it with something stronger. That something is definiteness of purpose. Hill placed this principle at the foundation of all achievement because a mind without a definite purpose is a battlefield occupied by conflicting desires. One part of you wants growth, another wants comfort, one wants greatness, another wants approval. Until purpose is fixed, the mind cannot unify its forces, and without unity, there is no sustained momentum. Definiteness of purpose is not a vague wish. It is not, "I want to be successful" or "I want a better life." Those are empty phrases the mind cannot act on. Purpose must be precise enough to organize behavior and intense enough to dominate attention. When Hill interviewed the world's most successful individuals, he found that they all shared one trait. They knew exactly what they wanted, and they refused to dilute that desire with alternatives. Your comeback demands that you define, with brutal honesty, what you are committed to becoming. Not what sounds respectable, not what pleases others, but what you are willing to suffer for. Because every meaningful purpose extracts a price, and the mind will only pay it if the reason is compelling enough. Once purpose is defined, desire must be emotionalized. Hill emphasized that emotion is the fuel of the subconscious mind. A cold idea has no power. A desire charged with feeling becomes obsession. This is why most people fail to sustain effort. They intellectually want success, but emotionally they are still attached to safety. Their actions reflect the stronger emotion every time. Your comeback requires you to feel your future before it arrives, not as fantasy, but as certainty. The subconscious mind does not respond to logic alone. It responds to imagery, repetition, and emotion. When you repeatedly imagine yourself disciplined, focused, powerful, and in control, you are not pretending. You are instructing your mind how to behave. Hill taught that faith is developed, not found. It is built through the deliberate practice of autosuggestion. This is where many misunderstand and underestimate the process. Autosuggestion is not positive thinking. It is mental conditioning. It is the daily, disciplined feeding of the mind with ideas that support your purpose until they override fear-based conditioning. Every day, whether consciously or unconsciously, you are practicing autosuggestion. The question is whether you are doing it deliberately or by default. If your internal dialogue is filled with regret, comparison, self-criticism, and doubt, you are programming your subconscious to reproduce those experiences. Your comeback requires you to become aware of this internal conversation and take control of it with authority. Authority is essential. Weak affirmations whispered with doubt have no effect. Hill insisted that autosuggestion must be repeated with confidence, emotion, and persistence. You must speak to your mind as a commander speaks to troops, not as a beggar asking for permission. The mind responds to certainty. When you declare who you are becoming with conviction, the subconscious begins to reorganize habits, perceptions, and reactions accordingly. This reorganization is uncomfortable. Old habits resist replacement. Old beliefs resist eviction. You may feel internal conflict, fatigue, even anxiety as your mind recalibrates. This is not a sign of failure. It is evidence of change. Hill made it clear that growth is always preceded by discomfort because the mind must abandon familiar patterns to adopt new ones. One of the most destructive patterns you must confront is indecision. Indecision is not neutral. It is an active force that drains energy and erodes confidence. When you hesitate repeatedly, the mind learns to distrust itself. Each delayed decision reinforces the belief that you are incapable of choosing wisely. Over time, this creates paralysis. Your comeback demands decisiveness, not perfection, but commitment. Hill observed that successful individuals are not those who always make the right decision, but those who make decisions quickly and adjust with persistence. Indecision keeps you trapped in analysis while life moves forward without why. Ow! Decision is the moment when desire becomes action. It is the line between intention and execution. The mind gains strength from decisive action because it experiences momentum. Even small decisions made firmly rebuild self-trust. Each decisive act sends a message to the subconscious, I am in control. This message compounds over time. Fear will attempt to interrupt this process by magnifying the consequences of mistakes. It will convince you that waiting is safer than acting. Hill dismantled this illusion by pointing out that failure to decide is itself a decision, and often the most costly one. Opportunity does not wait for clarity. It responds to courage. Persistence is the armor that protects your purpose from temporary defeat. Hill defined persistence as the sustained application of effort backed by belief. Not emotional bursts of enthusiasm, but disciplined continuation regardless of mood. This is where most comebacks are abandoned. Not because the goal is unreachable, but because the individual stops too soon. Understand this clearly. Resistance increases right before breakthrough. The mind, sensing transformation, intensifies doubt as a final defense. Many interpret this as a sign to retreat. Hill recognized it as the final test. Those who persist pass through. Those who quit remain exactly where they are. Persistence is not blind stubbornness. It is intelligent endurance. It adapts strategy without surrendering purpose. When one approach fails, another is attempted, but the destination never changes. Your comeback will require this level of commitment. You must decide in advance that quitting is not an option, regardless of emotional state. Self-discipline sustains persistence. Without discipline, desire dissipates under pressure. Hill emphasized control over the emotions as a prerequisite for success. Emotional reactions, if left unchecked, sabot. Age focus. Anger, frustration, envy, and self-pity drain energy that should be directed toward purposeful action. Discipline begins with awareness. You must observe your reactions without immediately obeying them. The impulse to procrastinate, to escape, to seek comfort instead of progress must be challenged. Each time you resist an unproductive impulse, you strengthen your ability to direct your behavior intentionally. Your comeback requires you to become emotionally sober. Not numb, but controlled. Emotional mastery does not mean suppression. It means channeling energy into productive action rather than reactive behavior. Hill understood that uncontrolled emotion is one of the primary causes of failure. Another force you must confront is the influence of your environment. Hill warned about the subtle power of associations, the people you listen to, the conversations you engage in, the ideas you consume all shape your thinking. A comeback cannot survive in a hostile mental environment. If you surround yourself with doubt, negativity, and complacency, your purpose will weaken. This is not about arrogance or isolation. It is about protecting your mental space while it is being rebuilt. A mind under construction is vulnerable. You must be selective about what you allow into it. Imagination now becomes your strategic tool. Hill viewed imagination as the faculty through which the mind converts desire into form. Before any achievement manifests physically, it exists as a mental image. Your comeback requires you to rehearse success mentally until it feels familiar. The subconscious moves toward what feels familiar, not necessarily what is beneficial. If failure feels familiar, it will unconsciously recreate it. By repeatedly visualizing yourself acting with discipline, confidence, and control, you make success familiar. Over time, behavior aligns with this internal I am. Age. There are moments ahead when you will feel alone in your resolve. Others may not understand your intensity, your discipline, your refusal to drift. Hill cautioned that the path of self-mastery is often solitary, not because others oppose you, but because few are willing to endure the discomfort required. This solitude is not punishment. It is preparation. In these moments, your relationship with yourself deepens. You learn to rely on internal validation rather than external approval. This is critical because a comeback driven by applause will collapse the moment applause fades. Faith must now be protected, not as blind optimism, but as disciplined belief. Faith is strengthened by evidence of action, not by wishful thinking. Each disciplined act reinforces belief. Each persistent effort builds confidence. Faith grows when you prove to yourself repeatedly that you can be trusted. Hill taught that the mind cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one when emotion is present. Use this to your advantage. See yourself overcoming obstacles before they arise. Feel the calm confidence of discipline. Experience the satisfaction of persistence in advance. Your comeback is not a single event. It is a sequence of internal victories that compound over time. Each day you refuse to drift. Each decision you make firmly, each fear you confront instead of obey. These are the building blocks of transformation. There will be days when progress feels invisible. Hill warned against measuring success solely by external results. The most important changes occur internally first. The mind reorganizes before circumstances follow. Trust this process. Impatience is a form of doubt. The world may not recognize your effort immediately. That is irrelevant. You are not rebuilding your life for recognition. You are reclaiming sovereignty over your mind. The foundation upon which all external success rests. As this process continues, something subtle but profound will happen. Your identity will shift. You will no longer see yourself as someone trying to change, but as someone who has changed. Behavior will follow identity effortlessly. Discipline will feel natural. Persistence will feel inevitable. This is the quiet power of Napoleon Hill's philosophy. It does not rely on motivation. It relies on law, mental law, cause and effect, thought and result. Once you align with these principles, your comeback is no longer a question of if, but when, and when doubt returns, as it inevitably will, you will meet it not with panic, but with understanding. You will recognize it as resistance, not truth. You will respond with discipline, not emotion. This is how inner conquest is won. You are no longer waiting for your comeback. You are executing it one thought, one decision, one disciplined action at a time. There is a stage in every true comeback where the external world grows quiet and the internal struggle intensifies. This is the phase Napoleon Hill understood better than most, because it is the phase where the mind either becomes your most powerful ally or your most ruthless saboteur. Up to this point, you have confronted purpose, desire, faith, decision, and discipline. Now you face something deeper, something more unforgiving, the invisible habits of thought that have been shaping your identity for years without your permission. Most people believe their thoughts are private, harmless, fleeting. Hill exposed this belief as one of the most destructive illusions a human being can hold. Thoughts are not passive, they are directives. They instruct the subconscious. They shape perception. They influence behavior long before action becomes conscious. The life you are living is the physical echo of the thoughts you have repeated the most. Your comeback requires that you accept this truth without defense, without denial, without escape. This is where responsibility becomes absolute. Not moral responsibility, creative responsibility, the understanding that you are the architect of your inner world, whether you design it intentionally or allow it to form randomly. Hill warned that a mind left undirected drifts toward fear, doubt, and limitation because those states require no effort. Discipline requires effort. Direction requires vigilance. Drift happens automatically. You may now begin to notice how often your mind attempts to return to old patterns. A moment of silence and it fills with worry. A pause in action and it seeks distraction. A challenge appears and it recalls past failures. This is not weakness, it is conditioning. and conditioning can be reversed. Hill emphasized that the subconscious mind operates through habit and repetition. It does not judge content, it amplifies it. If you have spent years rehearsing scarcity, self-doubt, and hesitation, those patterns have become deeply ingrained. Your comeback is not about eliminating them overnight, it is about starving them of attention and replacing them with stronger, more deliberate patterns. This requires vigilance, not obsession, but awareness. You must begin to observe your thoughts as if they belong to someone else, detached, curious, unemotional. When a limiting belief surfaces, you do not argue with it. You do not indulge it. You replace it. You assert a new directive with certainty. The mind responds to authority. When you speak internally with hesitation, the subconscious ignores you. When you speak with conviction, repetition, and emotional certainty, it listens. Hill taught that repetition alone is not enough. Emotion is the catalyst. You must feel the truth of what you are affirming. You must believe it deeply, enough to impress it upon the subconscious. This belief is not blind, it is constructed. Each disciplined action strengthens it. Each time you do what you said you would do, belief grows. Each time you retreat from your own commitment, belief weakens. Faith is not built by words alone, it is built by evidence. And the most powerful evidence is self-trust. Self-trust is the currency of a comeback. Without it, desire collapses under pressure. With it, persistence becomes natural. Hill observed that those who fail repeatedly often do so because they have broken too many promises to themselves. Over time, the subconscious learns not to take them seriously. Your comeback requires you to rebuild credibility with yourself. Start with small commitments and honor them relentlessly. Not because they are impressive, but because they are promises. Each fulfilled commitment sends a message to your subconscious, I follow through. This message compounds. Confidence grows quietly, not through grand declarations, but through consistent action. Fear will attempt to undermine this process by magnifying uncertainty. It will ask questions that have no immediate answers. What if it doesn't work? What if you fail again? What if you waste time? Hill identified fear as a state of mind, not a condition imposed by reality. Fear feeds on imagination just as faith does. The difference is direction. If imagination is left unchecked, fear will use it to create catastrophic scenarios. If imagination is disciplined, faith will use it to construct success. Your comeback requires you to consciously redirect imagination. When fear presents a future of failure, you must deliberately replace it with a vision of persistence, resilience, and growth. This is not denial, it is selection. You choose which images to energize. The mind cannot hold opposing emotional states simultaneously. When faith is active, fear weakens. When fear is indulged, faith erodes. Mastery lies in deciding which state you feed. Another critical element now emerges, the mastery of reaction. Life will test you, delays will occur, obstacles will appear. People may doubt you. Circumstances may temporarily worsen. Hill taught that success is not determined by what happens to you, but by how you respond mentally and emotionally. Reaction reveals identity. When setbacks occur, do you interpret them as confirmation of limitation or as feedback for adjustment? Do you collapse into self-pity or recalibrate strategy? The meaning you assign to events determines their impact. Two individuals can experience the same setback and emerge with opposite outcomes. Your comeback depends on meaning discipline. You must refuse to assign meanings that weaken you. Temporary defeat is not failure unless you decide it is. Delay is not denial unless you surrender. Criticism is not truth unless you internalize it. Hill emphasized that the mind is always interpreting events. Your task is to ensure those interpretations serve your purpose. Persistence now becomes less about effort and more about identity. You are no longer pushing yourself forward. You are acting in alignment with who you have decided to become. Quitting no longer feels like an option because it contradicts your self-concept. This is the shift that separates those who return stronger from those who relapse into old patterns. Self-discipline deepens here. It becomes less about forcing behavior and more about maintaining standards. Standards for how you think, how you speak to yourself, how you use your time, how you respond to pressure. Hill believed that high standards are the silent markers of success. They operate when no one is watching. Time management becomes a mental practice, not a scheduling one. Where attention goes, energy flows. If your attention is scattered, progress slows. If your attention is focused, momentum accelerates. Your comeback requires ruthless prioritization, not of tasks, but of thoughts. You must learn to interrupt mental distractions. Worry is wasted imagination. Rumination is recycled fear. Comparison is misplaced attention. None of these serve your purpose. Each time you catch your mind drifting into unproductive territory, you must redirect it deliberately. This is mental training. Training implies repetition. You will not master this in a week. Hill was clear that mental habits are formed over time through consistent practice. The mind resists change initially, then adapts, then eventually accepts the new pattern as normal. Persistence through the early resistance phase is critical. There will be moments when discipline feels exhausting, when old comforts tempt you, when shortcuts appear appealing. Hill warned that shortcuts often lead back to the same place. A comeback built on compromise collapses under pressure. Integrity with your purpose must be non-negotiable. Integrity here does not mean morality. It means alignment. Alignment between what you say you want and what you do daily. Each misalignment weakens momentum. Each alignment strengthens it. Your internal world must match your declared intention. Imagination continues to play a central role. You must not only visualize success, but also rehearse resilience. See yourself handling rejection calmly. Picture yourself adjusting strategy without frustration. Imagine yourself maintaining discipline when motivation fades. These rehearsals prepare the mind for reality. Hill believed that the subconscious cannot distinguish between rehearsal and experience. When you rehearse strength, you install it. When the moment arrives, the response feels familiar. This is why preparation is psychological before it is practical. Another invisible force now becomes apparent, the influence of collective thought. Hill wrote extensively about the power of group mentality, both constructive and destructive. Most people are unconsciously influenced by the dominant thinking of their environment. A comeback requires conscious resistance to this influence. You may feel pressure to conform, to explain yourself, to justify your intensity. Hill warned that the fear of criticism is one of the most paralyzing fears of all. It keeps people from acting decisively. It keeps them trapped in mediocrity disguised as humility. You must decide whose approval matters. If your purpose requires you to outgrow certain environments, so be it. Growth often creates distance, not because you are superior, but because your direction has changed. This is a natural consequence, not a betrayal. As discipline strengthens, something else begins to shift: emotional stability. You are less reactive, less easily discouraged, less dependent on external validation. This stability is a sign of inner authority. Hill recognized this as a hallmark of self-mastery. With stability comes clarity. Decisions become easier. Distractions lose appeal. You begin to recognize which actions align with your purpose instinctively. This is not intuition in the mystical sense. It is the subconscious integrating your repeated directives. You are now operating from a different mental center, not fear-driven, not comfort-driven, but purpose-driven. This does not eliminate struggle. It changes your relationship to it. Struggle becomes information, not identity. There will still be moments of doubt. Hill never claimed otherwise. The difference is that doubt no longer dictates behavior. It becomes background noise rather than command. You acknowledge it and move forward anyway. This is the quiet strength of a real comeback. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is controlled, relentless, internally governed. Others may not notice immediately. That is irrelevant. The work is being done where it matters. As this phase deepens, you may realize that the person you were trying to become is no longer ahead of you. They are emerging through you. Your actions feel congruent. Your thoughts feel intentional. Your direction feels certain. This is not the end. It is the foundation. What comes next will test this foundation under greater pressure. But now you are no longer rebuilding from collapse. You are constructing from strength. And strength, once established internally, does not disappear easily. There comes a point in a true comeback where the internal work begins to collide with external reality in ways that feel unsettling. This is the phase where Napoleon Hill's principles stop feeling theoretical and start demanding proof. The mind you have been disciplining, the beliefs you have been installing, the identity you have been reshaping now face resistance from the world outside. Circumstances do not immediately rearrange themselves to reward inner change. In fact, they often push back. This is not punishment, it is calibration. Hill understood that life tests commitment before it validates belief. When a person begins to think differently, act with discipline, and move with intention, the environment responds by exposing weaknesses that still remain. Old problems resurface, new obstacles appear, progress feels slower than expected. This is where many misinterpret the process and retreat. They assume something is wrong. In truth, something is right. The world is asking a question: are you rehearsing change or are you embodying it? This stage demands an unshakable relationship with patience. Not passive patience, but controlled endurance. Hill warned that impatience is often disguised fear. It is the fear that effort will not be rewarded, that time is being wasted, that results should already be visible. Impatience rushes the process and fractures persistence. Your comeback requires you to outlast this impulse. You must understand that momentum is not always visible. The mind often shifts faster than circumstances can respond. External reality lags behind internal alignment. This delay is not a sign of failure. It is a law of cause and effect. Thought initiates, action reinforces, reality follows. During this phase, doubt may attempt a more sophisticated attack. It will no longer shout, it will whisper. It will suggest compromise. It will propose moderation. It will say things like, slow down, be realistic, don't exhaust yourself, maybe this is enough. Hill recognized this as one of the most dangerous moments in personal development because the mind is no longer tempted to quit entirely, but to settle. Settling is more destructive than failure. Failure can be analyzed and corrected. Settling feels comfortable while quietly killing potential. A comeback that ends in settling becomes a slower form of self-betrayal. You must now confront your relationship with comfort. Comfort is not evil, but it is deceptive. It numbs urgency. It dulls desire. It convinces you that survival is achievement. Hill taught that progress requires a degree of constructive discomfort. Growth demands friction. Without it, the mind stagnates. This is where self-discipline transforms again. Earlier, discipline was about control. Now it becomes about consistency under monotony. The excitement of beginning has faded. The identity shift feels less dramatic. Progress feels repetitive. This is the real work. Hill emphasized that persistence is most often tested not by crisis, but by boredom. Boredom tempts you to abandon structure, to skip routines, to delay effort, to indulge distractions. Each small lapse feels harmless. Together, they erode momentum. Your comeback requires you to treat boredom as a signal, not an excuse, a signal that discipline must deepen, not relax. At this stage, your internal dialogue becomes critical. How you speak to yourself during slow progress determines whether momentum survives. If you interpret monotony as stagnation, motivation will decay. If you interpret it as consolidation, strength builds quietly. Meaning matters more than mood. Hill taught that the subconscious responds powerfully to consistency. Repeated actions performed with belief, even when emotion is neutral, continue to shape behavior and identity. You do not need to feel inspired to persist. You need to be committed. Commitment is not emotional. It is contractual. You made an agreement with yourself when you decided to return stronger. This phase tests whether that agreement holds when enthusiasm fades. Most people only keep promises when they feel like it. Successful individuals keep them because they decided to. Your environment may now challenge you more directly. People may question your discipline. They may misinterpret your focus as obsession. They may feel threatened by your consistency. Hill warned that when one individual changes, it exposes the stagnation of others. Resistance is often disguised as concern. You must develop emotional detachment from these reactions, not coldness, but clarity. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your purpose does not require their approval. A comeback driven by consensus collapses at the first disagreement. Another invisible test emerges here. the temptation to seek validation. When effort is sustained without visible reward, the mind seeks reassurance, praise, recognition, signs. Hill emphasized that reliance on external validation weakens self-trust. It shifts authority outward. Your comeback requires internal validation as the primary source of confidence. Internal validation comes from alignment, from knowing that today's actions matched your intention, from recognizing discipline regardless of outcome. This is quieter than praise, but far more stable. It does not fluctuate with opinion. As this stability develops, your emotional range narrows in a powerful way. High highs and low lows soften. You become less reactive to wins and losses. This is not indifference, it is maturity. Hill recognized emotional equilibrium as a critical component of long-term success. Emotional extremes exhaust energy. Balance conserves it. With balance comes strategic thinking. You begin to evaluate obstacles without panic. You adjust plans without self-judgment. You see setbacks as data rather than verdicts. This shift marks a deeper level of mental mastery. Your imagination now operates with greater precision. Earlier, it was used to visualize success and resilience. Now, it becomes a tool for problem solving. Hill believed imagination bridges the gap between limitation and opportunity. When circumstances block one path, imagination constructs another. This requires confidence in your creative capacity. Doubt stifles imagination. Faith activates it. Faith here is not certainty of outcome, but confidence in your ability to adapt. When you trust that you can find a way, the mind searches relentlessly. You may begin to notice subtle changes in how you perceive challenges. Problems that once felt overwhelming now appear manageable. This is not because they are smaller, but because you are stronger. Strength alters perception. This is also the phase where time perception changes. You become more present, less anxious about the future, less trapped in the past. Hill emphasized that effective action occurs in the present moment. Regret and anxiety drain focus. Purpose anchors it. The temptation to revisit old identities may surface here. Nostalgia, old habits, familiar escapes. They appear harmless, even comforting. Hill warned that regression often occurs not from stress, but from sentimentality. The mind romanticizes the past to avoid the discipline of the present. You must recognize this pattern without judgment. Acknowledge the pull, then reaffirm your direction. You are not rejecting your past, you are refusing to live in it. As persistence continues and internal authority solidifies, you begin to trust your decisions more deeply. You stop second-guessing minor choices. You move forward with confidence even when outcomes are uncertain. This authority is earned, not assumed. Hill described this state as alignment with one's innate purpose. When purpose is clear and discipline is consistent, decision-making becomes intuitive. You are no longer debating who you are. You are expressing it. This expression attracts opportunities, but not always in obvious forms. Sometimes opportunity arrives disguised as responsibility, as challenge, as increased demand. Hill emphasized that growth often requires greater capacity before greater reward. If you shrink from responsibility, opportunity passes unnoticed. Your comeback may now ask more of you. More discipline, more focus, more courage. This is not a sign that you are being overwhelmed. It is evidence that you are being prepared. Capacity expands through use. Fear may resurface in a new form. The fear of success, the fear of visibility, the fear of sustaining a higher standard. Hill identified this fear as one of the most subtle. Success threatens the comfort of anonymity. It demands consistency. It removes excuses. You must confront this fear honestly. Are you willing to be accountable to your potential? Are you willing to maintain discipline when no one is forcing you? A comeback is not just about rising, it is about remaining. This is where self-discipline becomes identity-bound. You no longer ask, should I do this? You ask, is this who I am? Actions inconsistent with your identity feel foreign. This is the deepest level of behavioral change. At this stage, the mind becomes quieter, not empty, but ordered. Thoughts are fewer, more deliberate. Emotional noise fades. Focus sharpens. Hill believed this mental clarity allows access to deeper creative insight. Decisions feel cleaner. Direction feels obvious. You are no longer chasing success. You are aligning with it. This alignment creates a sense of inevitability, not arrogance, but calm certainty. You trust the process because you are the process. The world may still be catching up, Ults may still be forming. That is irrelevant. The internal conquest is largely complete. External achievement now becomes a matter of time and continued application. This phase is not celebrated. It is endured. It is quiet. It is disciplined. It is powerful. And it is preparing you for the final test, full ownership of your destiny, without retreat, without excuse, without compromise. There is a point in the comeback where the struggle no longer feels like resistance from the outside world, but a negotiation with your own depth. This is the phase Napoleon Hill understood as the crossing from effort into ownership. You are no longer fighting to become disciplined. You are confronting whether you are willing to live permanently at the level you have reached. Temporary transformation is common. Permanent transformation is rare. This stage separates the two. Up to now, your progress has been driven by intention, vigilance, and persistence. But now something more demanding emerges, consistency without novelty. There is no rush of beginning, no dramatic internal conflict, no crisis forcing growth, just the quiet requirement to show up again and again, without applause, without urgency, without external pressure. This is where most people unconsciously retreat, not because they fail, but because they tire of sustaining greatness. Hill warned that success is not difficult to achieve once, it is difficult to maintain. The habits that build momentum must become the habits that define identity. Otherwise, regression sets in subtly. A skipped discipline here, a relaxed standard there. Nothing dramatic, just erosion. Your comeback now asks a deeper question. Are you committed to who you have become, or were you only committed to escaping who you were? Escaping pain is a powerful motivator, but it fades once pain subsides. Purpose is what remains when pain is gone. This is why Hill insisted that definiteness of purpose must be anchored beyond emotion. Emotion fluctuates. Purpose endures. You may notice now that your mind seeks justification to loosen structure. It will tell you that you deserve rest, that you have earned relaxation, that you can afford to ease up. Some of this may be true. Rest is not weakness. Recovery is not retreat. But the mind often disguises surrender as self-care. The difference lies in intention. Recovery restores discipline. Surrender dissolves it. You must become precise in how you interpret your own impulses. Precision is the mark of mastery. You no longer ask, what do I feel like doing? You ask, what maintains alignment? This question becomes your compass. Hill taught that self-discipline at this level is no longer enforced through willpower alone. It is sustained through self-respect. You act with consistency not because you fear failure, but because inconsistency feels beneath you. This shift is subtle but profound. Standards replace struggle. Standards are powerful because they operate automatically. When your standard for thinking, acting, and deciding is high, deviation feels uncomfortable. You correct course instinctively. This is not rigidity, it is coherence. Your emotional landscape now changes again. Earlier, emotional control meant resisting impulses. Now it means refinement. You become sensitive to subtle internal signals. When focus drifts, you notice it immediately. When discipline softens, you adjust without drama. There is no self-criticism, only correction. Hill emphasized that self-mastery does not mean perfection, it means rapid recovery. Mistakes are inevitable. What matters is how quickly you return to alignment. The longer you remain off course, the more momentum you lose. Mastery shortens that gap. This stage also reveals how deeply fear has been dismantled. Fear no longer dominates decisions, but it may still appear as hesitation before expansion. Larger opportunities require larger responsibility. Responsibility exposes you to greater risk, visibility, and expectation. Hill observed that many individuals subconsciously sabotage growth at this point to avoid pressure. You must examine your relationship with pressure honestly. Pressure is not the enemy of success. It is the environment in which capacity expands. Avoiding pressure keeps you comfortable but small. Accepting pressure forces growth. Your comeback now requires courage of a different kind. Not the courage to start, but the courage to sustain. Not the courage to dream, but the courage to deliver consistently. This courage is quieter, less dramatic, more demanding. You may notice that your tolerance for distraction has decreased. Noise feels irritating. Chaos feels draining. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. Hill recognized that a focused mind naturally rejects unnecessary stimulation. Attention becomes valuable. You guard it carefully. Guarding attention is now one of your primary disciplines. Where attention goes, life follows. If attention leaks into triviality, energy follows it there. Your comeback requires intentional allocation of attention to what advances your purpose. This may require difficult choices, limiting certain conversations, reducing exposure to certain media, declining opportunities that do not align. Hill warned that not all opportunities are beneficial. Some are distractions disguised as progress. Discernment becomes essential. You evaluate choices not by how they feel, but by where they lead. Immediate gratification loses appeal when long-term alignment is clear. This clarity is the reward of sustained discipline. Your imagination continues to evolve. Earlier, it was used to visualize outcomes. Now, it becomes strategic foresight. You anticipate challenges before they arise. You mentally rehearse responses. You prepare emotionally for pressure. This preparation reduces shock and preserves composure. Hill believed that composure under pressure is one of the highest forms of power. Emotional reactions waste energy. Calm analysis preserves it. You now respond to difficulty with curiosity rather than panic. This response keeps you effective. Another subtle shift occurs in how you view time. Urgency is replaced by patience with momentum. You understand that meaningful results compound. You stop demanding immediate payoff and start trusting process. This trust is not passive, it is active confidence in cause and effect. Hill Tao. That impatience often reveals doubt in one's own methods. When you trust your system, you allow it time to work. Your comeback now rests on this trust. There may still be moments of isolation. Growth often narrows social circles. Not everyone can relate to your discipline, your focus, your refusal to drift. Hill acknowledged that loneliness is sometimes the cost of self-direction. But he also noted that inner alignment creates a sense of companionship with purpose itself. You are no longer seeking belonging through approval. You belong to your mission. This belonging stabilizes you. At this stage, feedback from the world becomes more nuanced. Success may begin to appear in subtle forms: increased responsibility, quiet recognition, gradual improvement. Hill warned against overreacting to early success. Pride invites complacency. Humility sustains growth. Humility here does not mean self-doubt, it means respect for the process. You acknowledge progress without idolizing it. You continue working without assuming arrival. This attitude protects momentum. Your relationship with failure also transforms. Failure no longer threatens identity. It becomes feedback, information, data. You adjust without emotional collapse. This resilience is one of the most powerful outcomes of mental mastery. Hill emphasized that resilience is not toughness for its own sake. It is adaptability anchored in purpose. When purpose is clear, obstacles become navigational challenges, not personal attacks. As your comeback stabilizes, you may feel a growing sense of responsibility beyond yourself. Success is no longer just escape or achievement. It becomes expression, contribution, leadership through example. Hill believed that the highest form of success includes service, but service born of strength, not sacrifice. This sense of responsibility must be handled carefully. It should not dull. Focus, it should refine it. You lead first by mastering yourself. Influence follows naturally. Now comes one of the most dangerous temptations, the belief that the work is done. Hill warned that complacency often arrives disguised as confidence. True confidence remains alert. It knows that maintenance is as important as creation. Your comeback is not an event. It is a condition, a way of thinking, a way of deciding, a way of responding. As long as these remain disciplined, progress continues. You are now living from internal authority rather than external reaction. Circumstances no longer dictate your state. You carry your state into circumstances. This is power. Power does not announce itself. It operates quietly, consistently, relentlessly. The final challenge approaches not as a threat, but as an invitation to claim full ownership of your life without reservation. To stop seeing yourself as someone in recovery and start seeing yourself as someone in command. This transition requires one final surrender, the surrender of excuses entirely, even subtle ones, even justified ones, even comfortable ones, because the final phase of a comeback is not about becoming stronger, it is about becoming undeniable. There is a final threshold in every real comeback, and it is not marked by success, applause, or visible victory. It is marked by a decision so complete that retreat no longer exists as a psychological option. Napoleon Hill understood this threshold as the moment a person stops seeing life as something that happens to them and begins living as the primary cause behind everything they experience. This is not confidence. This is ownership. Up to now, you have rebuilt discipline, reclaimed focus, sharpened purpose, and forged mental control. But all of it converges here, at the point where excuses lose their power entirely. Not the obvious excuses you all read. Why rejected, but the subtle ones that hide behind logic, fatigue, past wounds, and circumstance. This is where most people stop short. They become improved versions of who they were, but never become who they are capable of being. Hill warned that partial commitment produces partial lives. The mind cannot serve two masters, purpose and comfort, discipline and indulgence, certainty and hesitation. One always dominates. The comeback reaches completion only when you decide without reservation that your life will no longer be governed by reaction, fear, or convenience. This is where total responsibility begins. Total responsibility does not mean blaming yourself for everything that happened to you. It means claiming authorship over everything that happens next. It means accepting that from this moment forward, your thoughts are your commands, your habits are your signature, and your results are your evidence. There is no room here for self-pity. Hill viewed self-pity as one of the most destructive mental states because it disguises surrender as sensitivity. It drains energy while pretending to heal. A mind committed to greatness does not indulge self-pity. It processes pain, extracts wisdom, and moves forward with clarity. You may still carry scars. You may still remember losses. You may still feel the weight of time. None of that disqualifies you. Hill made it clear that the past has no creative power unless you grant it authority. Memory is only dangerous when it becomes identity. You are not what happened to you. You are what you decide to do with it. At this stage, the mind must be governed with finality. No more negotiating with doubt. No more debating discipline. No more waiting for motivation. You act because you decided to act. You persist because quitting is no longer part of your internal language. You focus because distraction no longer aligns with who, why, are. This level of commitment is rare because it is uncomfortable. It removes the safety net of excuses. It eliminates the emotional escape routes most people rely on. It demands that you stand alone with your decisions and accept their consequences without complaint. Hill believed that this is where true power emerges. Power is not domination over others. It is dominion over self. When you no longer need validation, permission, or reassurance, your actions become clean, direct, effective. Now, fear appears one last time, but in its final form. Not as panic, not as doubt, but as a quiet question, what if you succeed and cannot go back? What if this version of you is permanent? What if there is no return to comfort, anonymity, or excuses? This fear reveals the truth. Comfort has been a cage. Excuses have been shelter. Drift has been familiar. To move forward fully means letting go of the identity that needed those things. You must let it go. Hill taught that identity determines destiny. You do not achieve your goals, you grow into them. And growth requires shedding old skins. This shedding feels like loss because it is. You are losing the version of you that needed reasons not to try. From this moment forward, you are no longer someone preparing for a comeback. You are someone who has returned to authority, returned to discipline, returned to purpose. And this return demands action. Not tomorrow, not when conditions improve, not when confidence feels perfect. Action now in alignment with the standards you have forged. Action that reflects who you are, not who you were. Action that proves to yourself above all else that this transformation is real. Hill insisted that the subconscious is convinced by behavior, not intention. Every decisive action you take from this point forward cements your identity. Every disciplined response strengthens your authority. Every refusal to drift seals your commitment. You must now live as though your mind is sacred territory. Guard it fiercely. Feed it deliberately. Direct it relentlessly. Allow no thought to linger that contradicts your purpose. Allow no habit to survive that weakens your standards. This is not obsession. This is sovereignty. The world will test this sovereignty. Challenges will arise. Pressure will increase. Responsibility will expand. You must meet all of it without retreat, not because it is easy, but because you chose this path. Remember this clearly. No one is coming to save you, and that is not a threat. It is freedom. You are the thinker. You are the decider. You are the builder. The same mental laws that created your setbacks will now produce your expansion because you are finally directing them consciously. Do not romanticize struggle. Use it. Do not fear pressure. Grow under it. Do not wait for certainty. Create it through action. From this moment on, let your life become evidence, evidence of discipline, evidence of persistence, evidence of controlled thought and deliberate action. Let results speak where explanations once lived. Stand up internally and refuse to drift ever again. Decide what you demand from life and from yourself, and then act every day as if that decision is final, because it is. This is not a promise of ease. This is not a guarantee of comfort. This is a demand for commitment. Commit to thinking with precision. Commit to acting with discipline. Commit to persisting without negotiation. Commit to owning every outcome without excuse. Your comeback is no longer approaching. It is happening now. Take responsibility. Take control. Take action. And never hand your power back.